So I just want to welcome everybody here today. Thanks for joining us. Just as a little quick intro for everybody, the Tourism Industry Association of Prince Edward Island, with support from ACOA and Events Nova Scotia, conducted consumer research to better understand the mindset of event goers and the impact of COVID-19. MQO Research VP of Research and Engagement, Lianne Sarson, is here today to present the findings that will help festival and events planned for the future. So with that, I will hand it over to Lianne.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And thank you everyone for joining us today and to Event Atlantic for hosting. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share some of these insights and hopefully get folks in a great place to really embrace the return to events in person in Atlantic Canada. So before we get started, I did want to give you a little bit of background on who we are. Although I'm here today speaking on behalf of MQO Research, we are part of the group M5 of companies, which is a full service, fully integrated marketing agency made up of the companies that you see here. So we have a marketing communications company, public relations, which is crisis communication, media training, government relations, Wavelight, which is our in-house production company, Group ATN, which is a consulting firm focused on strategy and economic development, and of course MQO, which is our research arm, and we focus on providing industry best tools and practices to conduct research and support data-driven decisions. So the work that I'm going to be showing today and the recommendations are primarily driven by the research that we conducted on behalf of the group, but we also drew in expertise from our marketing agency as well as Group ATN. So on to the good stuff. So the goal of the session today is to really share insights on the mindset of event goers, as well as the impact of COVID-19 as we go forward from where we are today, with the intent of providing some really useful, practical, and actionable information to support the future of planning for festivals and events and the industry in Atlantic Canada as we move into beyond the pandemic for winter and for next summer and spring. So the COVID-19 pandemic obviously has had a substantial impact on festivals and events, the industry in Atlantic Canada and beyond. Vaccination rates are high and restrictions continue to lift, but consumer mindset has changed. And what we're trying to understand is not only where it is now, but what of those changes are going to stay with us as we do learn to live with COVID-19 and beyond the pandemic. So what are the lasting implications that we have to navigate for the future of festivals and events in the region? So what we did, just to provide a little bit of insight on where this information is coming from, we surveyed 1,546 Atlantic Canadian event goers and 811 event goers from Southern Ontario and Quebec. So that's who completed the survey, which was done online between August 6th and September 4th. And so we did focus on event goers. We wanted to understand the insights from people who were actually attending events. So anyone who hadn't attended an event in the last 3 years was screened out and not included in the survey. And so it was about between 20 and 30% in the two different markets that we looked at that were screened out who hadn't attended an event in the last 3 years. And we were pretty specific about what we wanted to make sure that we captured folks who went to outdoor sporting events, concerts, food festivals, and drink festivals, cultural festivals. So we asked about a number of different things to make sure that people weren't mentally lumping themselves into one group, and we could really capture the full market of event goers. As you know, over the past 2 years now almost, there's been a lot of ups and downs in terms of how COVID has impacted day-to-day lives and the ability to host and run events and the ability for people to attend events and even run sort of their day-to-day activities. So as I'd mentioned, vaccine rates are really, really high in Atlantic Canada, which is fantastic. Most people are fully vaccinated. People have kind of learned to run their day-to-day, but it's important, but there's still limits on travel. There's still things like vaccine policies, proof of vaccination policies that are in place. So it's important to understand the context in which the data was collected. So this data was collected in August of this year. And just to provide context as we're interpreting it, around the end of August, New Brunswick was experiencing a spike in cases. So they had around 170 active cases. PEI had under 10. Nova Scotia and Newfoundland were also sort of in a fairly good place with around 14 cases, and Nova Scotia had about 49. And Nova Scotia and New Brunswick were going through a period where there was an isolation requirement again to travel across the border. So it's important to just keep that in mind as we're going, because the context in which people are living at the time that they're answering these questions does affect how they're responding. So a return to festivals events, what does the demand look like? Event goers are really ready to get back to festivals and events, despite continued concern over COVID-19. So we found when we asked people, there was still a fairly high level of concern. People were worried. About 40% of Atlantic Canadian event goers and 38% of Quebec and Ontario event goers are still very anxious, but are intending to attend events anyway. So essentially, there's still anxiety there. People are still worried, but people are starting to get back to events. 56% of Atlantic Canadian event goers and 55% from those in that Quebec and Ontario market will attend events this winter. So again, that's the winter 2022, and a great sort of real world evidence of the demand returning is the Cavendish Beach Music Festival, which just went on sale last week, has already sold out. So people are anxious to get back, but COVID is still in the back of their minds. So Atlantic Canadians are more willing to attend events in spring and summer 2022. So again, that's a little even further from now. So we have more distance, more folks vaccinated, and also, of course, we're getting into the spring-summer season, which tends to be more popular for festivals events as it is. You can see there was 62% for Atlantic Canada and 55% for Quebec and Ontario of those people who said that they intend to attend events. We did want to know why folks that said they were not going to attend events wouldn't attend. And again, it's still that concern about catching and spreading COVID-19. That was about 55% of those people who said they weren't going to attend. That's where their concern levels lie, which is actually interestingly fairly close to what we saw in terms of concern back in October, although the concern for personally catching COVID was higher, and that's likely due to the fact that folks are able to get vaccinated now. So we also wanted to understand what the current mindset looks like for impact for venue and event size, as obviously crowd size is something that has been a concern as we've sort of worked through trying to control COVID. So in the winter, the majority of event goers are comfortable with events up to 2,000 attendees. That's where we start seeing that level of discomfort rise a little bit. And that's regardless of venue. That's indoors, outdoors. So the setting of event does still play a significant role, but it tends to be more significant in events that are over 2,000. So 57% of event goers indicated they'd be somewhat or much more likely to attend an event in only outdoor spaces. And you can see a bit of that pattern here. So you can see the graphs really show that kind of spike with indoor events. So the very first bar in each of those shows small events, and you can see across the board, this is for Atlantic Canada, 73%, 77%, 74%. It's fairly high. So regardless of whether it's indoors, outdoors, small events, people are very comfortable with. And we define small events for our survey as those that are 200 attendees or less. Medium events is still somewhat consistent from indoors, outdoors, but you can start to see a little bit more comfort there for medium events in the outdoor spaces. So you can see, and we define medium as 200 to 2,000. So that's where we were saying up to those 2,000, still the majority of people are fairly comfortable, but you do see a difference between indoor and outdoor events with comfort level rising for those outdoor events. One other thing to put in to consider that we found here is tents do not qualify in people's minds as safe as an outdoor event. So tents were one of the least popular venues when we looked at indoor, outdoor, or the combination of both. And with tents, there was a lot less comfort with small, medium, and large events, or likelihood to attend. So again, to put this in perspective, if we look back to October 2020, we did a similar survey with event goers and found that attending indoor events, the comfort level was very, very low for events that were even 50. So people were only 50 attendees, and that's what the max that people were comfortable with. And now we're looking at 200 to 2,000. There's still a fair amount of comfort. And we see the same pattern for the Quebec and Ontario market. They're a little more comfortable with larger events, but you can still see that pattern of most comfort with small, medium is still fairly consistent regardless of venue. And then when you get into the larger events, you can see the comfort level really rising with outdoor venues. And again, one of the more interesting findings that we found there is tents were not a popular venue option. Fewer participants reported they were likely to attend an event with a tent as a venue, and that was across all event sizes, so small, medium, and large. So one thing that we also asked about is, what does it mean if, or what's your comfort level if we have social distancing and masks in place? So before, we're looking at just generally comfort level, but we found that if social distancing and masks were not in place, there was a far lower comfort level. So event goers are much more comfortable attending those large events that are up to from 2,000 to 10,000 when social distancing and masks are required. So with those health and safety measures in place, you have a lot more flexibility to have a really large event size in different venues. So getting into health and safety, what is it that event goers need to feel safe now that we know that we have vaccines in place? And we did actually ask about vaccines. We found that vaccine policies do have a significant impact on likelihood to attend events. So 68% of Atlantic Canadians are less likely to attend events with no vaccine requirements for attendees. 57% were looking for staff to be fully vaccinated as well. We wanted to take a look as well as where we have the flexibility to remove some of those health and safety precautions where we are in a place where there are high levels of vaccination. We wanted to take a look at how that would impact attendance. So we asked for a number of different scenarios if any of the following would make folks more or less likely to attend a festival event, and we asked specifically about the winter 2022. And we essentially found, again, that there's really that desire to keep some of those health and safety measures in place in terms of being less likely to attend, not having vaccine requirements for attendees, not having social distancing, not having face masks for indoor venues, and large crowds. You can see there it ranges in the mid to high 60% in terms of how that's going to impact likelihood to attend. So this is for Atlantic Canada. The majority of people are a lot less likely to attend without those extra health and safety measures in place. And we see a similar pattern when we're looking at Quebec and Ontario. So these are the Quebec and Ontario numbers. And again, it's vaccination requirements, social distancing, face masks, and large crowds. So in terms of the impact on maintaining health and safety precautions on attendance, things that would likely increase attendance are a full refund and cancellation policy. So that was 65% of folks said they'd be more likely to attend. Frequent cleaning and sanitation is also something that majority of people are still looking for. Vaccinated staff, outdoor spaces only, and face masks. Again, these are things that are likely to increase attendance. And we saw similar patterns when we looked at the Quebec and Ontario market. So what this really says is that even though we're in a place where there's nothing really surprising here, it's just a really validation that the health and safety measures really are still important, even with the high vaccination rates. Things like the cleaning and sanitation, social distancing, masks, those are things that people aren't quite ready to let go of yet. So what does post-COVID look like for festivals and events? We've talked about health and safety measures, but what about technology? Lockdowns, restrictions, all of those things really accelerated the use of technology in a number of different industries and sectors, and festivals and events was no different. So hybrid events popped up, fully virtual events. We really all leveled up when it comes to video conferencing. So we wanted to see, as we get back to in-person events, if that appetite for technology changed at all, or if it was there, if people were still expecting that accelerated use of technology. So we asked about a number of different things, and it's important to note when you're looking at these, we didn't ask about preference, so would you like this, but we wanted to see what features might actually influence attendance behavior. So for a number of different technologies and event features, we simply said, would this make you more or less likely to attend an event? And you can see here the options like prepaid smart cards, pull up the graphs for you there. Prepaid smart cards, wearable technologies for cashless purchases. Those things like mobile apps, they weren't the real drivers of attendance. They weren't really increasing people's desire to attend as much as some of the more simple things that people are used to, that people used even before COVID-19. One of the biggest increases of events you can see there is the assigned seating tables. So 68% of people said they would be more likely to attend a festival or event if they were able to purchase tickets with assigned seating. Also things like the ability to buy with a credit card or debit card on site, and the ability to purchase things online. So those were some of the those were some of the largest drivers. So simple things have a high impact in terms of increasing attendance. People aren't necessarily expecting, and there's not really a hunger for really high tech solutions. They want to be able to use what they already have, like tap, as opposed to wearable technology for cashless purchases. So again, it's not about, if we move forward here, investment in technology might enrich an event, but it's not something that is necessary right now. As we move forward to recovery and as we get back to events, there's not a necessity to really invest in those high-tech solutions. The event options is again that really resulted in the largest increase in likelihood to attend were around assigned seating, the ability to purchase online rather than in person. So again, some of the things that for a lot of events were already in place. The other thing that was, and we mentioned this when we were going through the health and safety, uncertain times has really increased the desire for full or at least flexible cancellation policies. And that still remains very high. So about 65% of respondents were really looking for that flexible or full cancellation policy. The other thing that uncertainty has influenced, so these fluxes and sudden changes in spikes and having to sort of navigate around outbreaks, has resulted in a much shorter window for ticket purchasing. So whereas before people would purchase maybe weeks in advance or months in advance, a lot more people are really looking at days to weeks. And so this is something to be really conscious of in terms of cash flow, as well as when you're looking at your event, not to panic necessarily, because a large portion of people are still shortening that window of time and getting closer to events before they're comfortable purchasing. So all of this goes into saying that essentially people expect that festival and events have changed. There's been an increase in health and safety measures, and people want that. But when we talk to them about what they'd be willing to pay, they're not necessarily expecting to have an increase in prices that reflects some of those increased costs that people have to carry when they're putting on these events that are also managing to maintain all of these health and safety protocols, especially now that they're optional. So we found that about 27 to 28%, depending on the market, didn't expect to pay any more despite increased costs to operating festivals and events. And what I would say in terms of taking this, it's not necessarily that people aren't going to attend an event with an increased cost, but it's certainly not something that I would recommend advertising if you were going to highlight any additional costs due to health and safety. It's definitely something that you would want to just do in the background, as that expectation is not there. And we did have about a quarter in the Atlantic Canadian market and 19% in the Quebec and Ontario market that expected that prices would raise about 10%. So before I get into the takeaways, I wanted to kind of move through the background fairly quickly, the percentages and the numbers, to get to what it means for people and what are the actionable things that you can actually take from this information. What does it all mean? But I wanted to highlight that this isn't the end of the research. The consumer mindset is only one piece of really understanding what the impact of COVID-19 has been and really figuring out how the festivals and events industry needs to be supported and can be supported as they move forward. The other piece is the impact that COVID-19 has had on the supply chain. So there is a second piece of research that's going to be coming after this that's really going to look at asking questions like, have we lost suppliers during the pandemic? Are festivals and events owners going to have difficulty accessing suppliers? What's going to be the impact on costs of goods and services? Have suppliers had to diversify revenue streams? So these are some questions on the health of the supply chain that are also really impactful and important to understand to get the full picture of the industry now post-COVID. So we're going to be the purpose of the research, again, is to understand that supplier community that supports festivals and events, and hopefully come up with some possible solutions to ensure the health of that supply chain. So we're doing an online survey, some in-depth interviews, and a focus group to try and dig into some of this and get some answers to that. And you can see there are some of the research targets. So many of the folks that are here today may be receiving a phone call to participate in an interview, or may get a link to complete an online survey. And I'd encourage you to do that, to take the opportunity to help sort of get that full picture so that we can come up with some possible solutions to really support the future of festivals and events. So on to what we've learned. So I have taught 10 takeaways. There's a lot of information, and the full report will be available. There's an enormous amount of additional information that I didn't touch on today, but I wanted to focus on 10 things that I think would be good for folks to take away from this. So one, event goers do not expect a return to before COVID. So people understand, people's mindsets have changed, their expectations have changed, and they understand that festivals and events are going to change too. And in fact, that's what they want. They still have expectations for some of those health and safety requirements. They know that things are not quite ready to go back to the way they were, and there's no expectation that, that they will, at least yet. Two, demand has increased, but anxiety is still there. So people want to get back, but there is still a concern over COVID. Vaccine policies, the ability to social distance, mask wearing, these are all things that are likely to, if not increase attendance, at least make sure that you're not losing any potential attendees. On three, the pricing expectations have not changed. So many event goers aren't willing to pay more. So again, in communicating cost increases, highlighting changes in cost due to COVID-19, due to the requirements for additional health and safety measures isn't certainly something to highlight. But that's probably not news to anyone. Outdoor venues are still viewed as the safest option for large crowds, but we do know that health and safety measures can alleviate some of the concerns about attending events with large crowds. So the comfort level is really gone up from this time last year in terms of what people are ready to, the size of the crowd that people are willing to go. But if you have health and safety measures in place, people are far more comfortable attending events that are 2,000 to 10,000 folks. And again, in terms of outdoors, tents were the least popular venue option and not necessarily equivalent to outdoors in people's minds. New technology may not be required. So it's important for people to be able to purchase tickets online, contactless debit, credit card payments on site at events. Those are all things that there's the expectation built in there for folks, but event goers aren't really demanding technological capabilities like prepaid contactless payments, hybrid events. Those things are, again, they may enrich the experience. There's certainly a lot of research out there that supports the fact that if you do have contactless options, if people are wearing wearables-less payment, then there is an increase in what they're willing to spend, or what they do spend rather, when they're actually at the event. But it's certainly not something that will necessarily significantly increase attendance, and it's not going to turn people away. So in terms of investing in that, that's a choice that's not necessarily, people are really demanding that increase in technology. Number 6, changes in ticketing experiences. So it was a really interesting finding that above the technology, things like offering assigned seating or sections or things like that were really appealing to people. So options like the ability to reserve a table, book an area, having additional control over event goers' environment, that's something that people are looking for. So small changes to what you're able to book online or book when you're purchasing tickets can be a more impactful or bigger draw than technologies. And buying patterns have changed. So we've shifted to last minute purchases and waiting to see all of the uncertainty over the past 2 years, as I said, and changes in travel restrictions, changes in outbreaks. All of these things have shifted people's mindsets to wanting to take a wait and see approach and purchase things more close to events. That ties really closely to the next recommendation, which is flexible cancellation policies. So where you have the ability to have a flexible cancellation policy, you may get more of those folks purchasing farther ahead of time, as they would have comfort that they would potentially be able to change plans if situations change in terms of lockdowns or in terms of what folks are, their comfort level with COVID. And the biggest opportunities are still close to home. So even though travel is a lot easier now than it was this time last year, Atlantic Canadian event goers are still more likely to attend an event looking to the spring and the summer than those in Ontario and Quebec. So marketing dollars are still best spent close to home for the foreseeable future, as we have, again, a lot higher likelihood of those Atlantic Canadian event goers to travel and to attend events closer to home than the Ontario and Quebec market. And the last is, when you're taking all this information together, how are you communicating to people? So what does all of this information taken together mean for marketing? Because we know that people are still very concerned, there's still a high level of anxiety, it's important to have all the COVID health and safety measures in place, but that's not necessarily something that we need to lead with anymore. So back in October of last year, there was a lot of recommendations around making sure that you're communicating the importance of, and that you value health and safety measures, highlighting that there's masking, highlighting there's social distancing, showing images of a space so that people can see and feel safe ahead of time. And that has shifted. So with the combination of sort of the desire to get back to events with that anxiety, in terms of marketing, lead with emotion and then follow with safety. So really emphasize the excitement about being able to get back to events in person. We want to take advantage of that pent-up demand of being able to go to events and festivals again. But you still have to show that you're conscious of people's concerns and that you are still taking precautions. So in terms of how to balance those things, if you have a short form ad, the focus can shift to the excitement of event, and you can ignore safety, although any visual should acknowledge the new normal. So if you have, if you're showing folks together and you have social distancing, don't show people together crammed without masks. If you have a server at an event, make sure that in that image she has a mask on, but the focus should really be on the excitement of getting back, and again, the emotion of the event itself. That said, those safety precautions do need to be there. So for print ads, information that can be that can people absorb in more amount of time, the information should be easily accessible. So having a page that you can go to for your festival event that talks about the COVID safety precautions, they do need to be something that people can access. When people get excited about the event, see the marketing, and then go to the effort of to move to purchasing, that information should be there at that sort of stage of the purchasing journey. So they don't need to be the focus, but they do need to be available. And it's also not enough to rely on venue protocols. So it's still important for each event to communicate, have a dedicated COVID policy or have a dedicated COVID communication. Most of the provinces have vaccine-proof policies in place or coming. So for example, the fact that the majority of people want to see staff vaccinated and want folks to, other attendees to be vaccinated, don't rely on the knowledge that the province that you're operating has that already. That's something that should still be communicated within your event, that's something that you're still making sure is happening. The same with masking, if there's masking policies in place, and that's something that you're doing for your event, make sure that that information is still communicated within yourself, within your own festival and event. And I think with that, I will leave opportunity for any questions.
Wonderful, Lianne. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions or comments, or wants to kind of create a discussion, just unmute yourself and start chatting. I have a comment before I let anybody else open to the mic, but I did want to make a special note that Kim Doyle with TaiPi has put her email address in the comment section. If you would like to get an email invitation to the industry survey, just send her off an email. But yeah, I did want to say, like, your number 5 about technology. I find that's really, we kind of get overwhelmed with technology and thinking that we need to have the newest and brightest technology to kind of feel safe, but it gets a little overwhelming. So it's good to hear that, just having what we already have in place is what kind of that they're looking for. So like that. So there is a comment in the chat from Andrew Chandler. So I'm curious about how the respondents to the survey represent urban versus rural attendees.
We did make sure that our survey was representative. So we have quotas for each of the regions within the provinces to make sure that we have a good spread of urban versus rural. We haven't looked specifically at if there are significant differences between urban and rural locations, but that's certainly something that we could dig into and I can get back to you on. As I said, these are within a solid, sort of what you consider a margin of error if it was a telephone randomly selected sample, so that we have confidence that on the whole it's representative, but there very well may be small differences between urban and rural respondents. So it's something we can definitely dig into a bit.
Like that awkward moment when we wait for comments.
Here, I'll ask a question. I'm just curious, do you have any insights into why tents are so unpopular compared to the other venues?
There's a couple of things. That's something that I found really interesting, especially because it was such a stark contrast. I'd say a couple of things to keep in mind is that we were asking in that instance about the winter season. So for a minute you think, well, maybe tents aren't as popular for winter, but at the same time, outdoor events that were solely outdoor events were one of the most popular options. So my assumption would be that it's a combination that that tents for people represent not the freedom of outdoor and the level of security of an outdoor event, but they're also not giving the comfort of an indoor event. So that would be my assumption on their responses there, is that they sort of get the worst of both. You don't have the comfort of indoors, but because you're still in a fairly confined space, you don't get the level of health and safety concerns alleviated that you would in a strictly outdoor item, because you did see that drop for a combination of indoor outdoor events as well. So that kind of lends itself a little bit to that as being the potential for tents, but they were so much lower that it's certainly something that I'd be interested in again hearing from people more on the rationale. But the other research or the other questions does kind of back that up as a possibility.
Awesome, thank you.
Was there a differential between tents with walls and tents just for a shelter overhead?
No, there wasn't. So we wouldn't know if people would be assuming one or the other. Again, I would say based on the fact that the indoor-outdoor events were a little lower than the outdoor, or sort of fell in the middle, that people were thinking about tents that had walls, but it wasn't specified. And someone asked, oh, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh, sorry. No, keep going.
I was just going to say, someone asked if they could get a copy of the presentation and information, and absolutely, I believe the full report with the additional details as well as this presentation will be available.
So there's another question from Holly Quick in the chat. It says, did you find out how people feel about food and beverage at events? We're trying to decide if it's okay to serve people hot beverages at an outdoor event we have coming up in November.
So we didn't look specifically at how people feel about serving food and beverages at an event, but we did look at the interest on sort of comfort level with food festivals specifically, or drink festivals. So I would say, based on what we've seen here in terms of making an assumption based on other comfort, that it would be fine to serve food and drink at an event, but not a buffet.
And then there's another one here from Kathleen Flanagan. Is it possible to analyze the responses by age groups?
We did analyze the responses by age group, so we do have a breakdown in the full report on how ages differ in terms of comfort level, and it's not overly surprising in terms of what we found. There are similar patterns, but you tend to see greater discomfort, or I guess more caution, in the older groups, more likelihood to attend events and comfort in the younger groups. So nothing that's really surprising, but all that information is available. If you had something in particular that you were wondering about in terms of how the age groups differ, I may be able to recall it, but all the information is there in the report. It was interesting to see that many of the patterns of responses were similar in the age groups, and you'd see sort of, again, stronger in maybe an older age group or younger age group, but in terms of the ways in which they were responding, it was fairly consistent.
Kim here. I wanted to make a quick comment, just in case some may not have picked it up. That nugget in there of the different ticket type experiences and people wanting the assigned seating, I think there's a great opportunity here for events who used to just have a general admission ticket or a general admission and a VIP to really take a look at different types of experiences you could offer that are maybe smaller and more intimate, but higher yield. You can still charge more for those intimate experiences and explore your venue, and you could set up 4 to 5 different types of experiences rather than looking at just that GA option that you may have had before.
I think people were exposed to different types of options when it was necessary for events and festivals to think about ways to be able to provide social distancing, but we had pods or family groups that you were allowed to socialize with. So getting to experience events that had zoning, or that had people were able to sort of come within their bubble but separate from other people's bubbles, I think it really changed how people, what people think of in terms of how they can experience events. And it's a positive that people can take forward.
Looking around to see if there's nothing left in the chat, and we'll give another maybe 30 seconds or so if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question. And when you're typing them out, it takes a few seconds to get it out there. So you've done a really great job of covering all the bases, Lianne, so maybe there's not as many questions.
It's still, though it's been sort of distilled, there's into 10 sort of nuggets to take away. There is a lot more information in the full report, and I'd be happy to follow up if anyone had questions after they've had a chance to kind of digest it, or if any of the sort of 10 takeaways, they had follow-ups that were specific to their event, or that they were looking for kind of age differentials or urban-rural differentials. I'd be happy to follow up after.
We will have the full report online available for folks to download here very shortly. For those who are planning in short order and do want to see it, please send me a note. It's in the chat, kdoyle@taipi.pe.ca, and I can get you a copy of the full report. So we don't want anyone held back. So shoot me a note and I can send that off to you. And for the majority, we will post it here shortly. And also just want to remind everyone what Lianne mentioned about the next step. This is a many months long research progress here. So the next step is talking to you, is talking to industry on where is those next steps of how COVID has been affecting your world. And that information, it's very important that you do complete that. I know we all get surveys, but the information that comes back from this will help inform future programs and policies that could help the event sector going forward.
Thanks, Kim. And I'll throw in a plug there too that Event Atlantic will have the recording as well as the full document and the links for the survey on our website as well. So it'll be easy access. But if you want to see the recording, TIFI and Events Nova Scotia will both have those for you. Whichever route you typically go looking for your information, everybody will have it for you. I think if there's no more questions, we'll leave it there and give you back some time in your day. I want to thank everybody for joining today. There was a lot of information in that, which was all very fantastic. And I can't wait to see what comes next. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, everyone.